Welcome to the SS Podcast. It's your boy, Mike K. Smith, also known as AK's, also known as the coolest guy in sports. This is episode number 9 of season 2. In totality, this is episode number 46. Check, how you doing, man? How you feeling?
I'm doing good, man. I got some much-needed rest after this All-Star weekend, but we got another half of the season to go, so let's get the show on the road.
Definitely another half of the season to go. 30 games left in the regular season and not included in the playoffs. It's going to be very exciting. And kind of just going off that All-Star game, which was very, very fun to watch. Well, at least the last quarter was very, very fun to watch. Mm-hmm. And how did you feel about the All-Star game, and what are some of your expectations for a couple teams going forward?
Well, I love the All-Star game, especially the new format, especially is something Chris Paul recommended, head of the Players Association. I've experienced the Elam format before, just being a fan of watching the basketball tournament, which is usually played it over the summer. So I knew the target score was going to be something that was going to be implemented to this All-Star game, and I just loved it just from it added a competition factor, and I think it also had to do more so with just the passing of Kobe Bryant in general. You saw how players wanted to give it all because it's something that they wanted to give one last tribute to Kobe Bryant for, because we all know if he was in that All-Star game or around it, players would have competed for it. So it was nice to see our star players go all at it for one game, and also the charity element as well. Just seeing those kids cheering and disappointment when their teams lost or won, it just added another element to the game that I just think the game needed, and something that has to be carried on for future All-Star games as well.
I definitely agree with you. I thought it was fun, very exciting. I like the target score idea, and the guys played hard, like you said, probably because of of the Kobe Bryant situation and everything that's happened in the NBA. Yesterday was 24 days since Kobe Bryant has passed away and left this earth. So yeah, definitely guys were out playing hard and grinding, and I really enjoyed it because it was no fast break transition points in that last quarter, and you definitely got to see some of the real guys come to work that are real bucket getters and guys that you can put in a half court system and they can go to work. Some guys got a little exposed, but still though, it was fun to watch, and I think it's going to even be more exciting when we have some of the key superstars return for next year's All-Star game, like Kyrie Irving, like Kevin Durant, like Stephen Curry, like
Dame Lillard too.
Yeah, those guys and we'll really get to see those guys go at it, and hopefully the teams will be a little bit more even. And Giannis, if he's selected to be the captain next year, hopefully he picks a better roster, especially if it's going to be like that. Again, with the target score, with really no fast break transition, when it's a half court offense, a half court system, because he didn't have a guy on his roster to really create his own shot, because he can't create his own shot. And I was really kind of frustrated because they kind of benched Kyle Lowry for Trae Young, and as Kyle Lowry was playing defense, he was drawing charges in the All-Star game, which was kind of like, what are you doing? But I was kind of a little frustrated because I thought Trae Young could have helped Team Giannis, especially creating his own shot with his three-point shooting ability and stuff like that. I think he could have helped their team, but for whatever reason, he was benched. But I enjoyed the game, and I thought it was very, very exciting.
Yeah, most definitely. And even to go the other way around with the Team LeBron, they benched Luka as well. So it just shows you, like, they were really trying to go all out. So I guess in that type of game, defense was prioritized, a guy that could score and also defend as well. So Kyle Lowry got the nod over Trae Young. He took two key pivotal charges on James Harden. And he even took another one on LeBron that just wasn't a no call, but that led to a three. So it just shows you how defense was prioritized. Chris Paul got the nod, and he honestly had his case for All-Star MVP as well. And
true.
Go ahead. Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, I just didn't like how it ended on the free throw. That's the only element, I think, of the game that should have been changed. And obviously, if it led to a shooting foul, then, of course, I think you should take the free throw. But a foul like what when Kyle Lowry got switched on Anthony Davis, and he just had no other choice but the foul, I just think they should try to add something just so the game wouldn't end on a free throw unless it's a shooting foul, because it was exciting just because Anthony Davis, whether he wanted to or not, he missed the first free throw. But I would just like to see the game end on better terms than that. But aside from that, it was just great to see the individual matchups, like Joel Embiid wanted to go into the post, something we've been desired to see. He even had a good dream shake move on LeBron.
Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, a lot of people, we saw like the real true superstars, and people are going to say, well, it's an expedition game, but those guys are really going at it. And we saw, when I say like some of the guys struggled. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, Giannis.
You know what I'm talking about. Same thing that happened in the All-Star game is probably going to happen in the playoffs when it comes to the half-court setting. But I don't want to talk too much about that because every time I say something about Giannis, I get labeled as a Giannis hater. But
yeah, to his fairness, though, I'll say this: like for him, he never. There was only a handful of moments where I really felt like he could have made a move, but he didn't really get the ball in his hand as much because it was either give the ball to Kemba, Kyle Lowry had moves, and Joel didn't want to pass the ball. He just got the ball in the post and said, "Hey, I'm just gonna show everybody what I'm made of." And
yeah,
that game, Giannis, I do agree because it's gonna be the same thing in the playoffs when you have a well, and also to his credit, there's not going to be the 5 best players on the conference against him as well in this final setting or a playoff setting. But the teams are going to try to funnel him outside the paint. So if he doesn't have that move in the mid range, or isn't going to knock down outside shots, he's going to have rely on his teammates to make outside shots just so they could clear the paint for him. And if teams are going to say, "Hey, we'll just live with that," then again we're going to see another instance where Giannis is going to be a lesser version of himself come crunch time in the playoffs. But again, it's still it was like I said earlier, you're not going to see 5 of the best players on one team against Giannis. So that's what you're not going to see Kawhi Leonard even in the Eastern Conference playoffs because he's on the other side now. So I don't think there's going to be one individual matchup that can stop him. But he did definitely have I wouldn't say got exposed, but he definitely wasn't his best version of himself in that game as well.
When I say exposed, he really get exposed because we all know that's his weakness. You know what I'm saying? So really, technically, when I say exposed a little, I mean like his weakness, his warts kind of showed in his game during the All-Star game. But like you said, I don't think it's not one player that can particularly stop Giannis, but it's a team situation where you got teams like the Philadelphia Sixers, you got teams like the Miami Heat, teams that got real dogs on their team that can defend, that can really put up a defensive scheme on you. I think those two teams, like I know you're picking the Miami Heat to go to the finals and stuff. I picked the Sixers, earlier in the season, but I think those two teams who have defensive guys on their team, they got like the Philadelphia Sixers. Not only they got Joel Embiid, they probably got the best defensive player in the world in Ben Simmons as well. So after Kawhi Leonard, but it's going to be interesting in the second half of the season. Before the second half of the season, a team that I'm really looking forward to, I kind of talked about a little bit, is the Philadelphia Sixers. What are they going to do? Are they going to improve? Are they going to get better? Or are they going to kind of, stay in this limbo of, well, some nights they look like a championship team, some nights they look like a team that could get potentially knocked out in the first round. And I know this for a fact. I hope the Philadelphia Sixers, either they move up in the seeding or they fall back maybe to a 6 seed because they do not want to face the Miami Heat in the first round of the playoffs. I think that's a terrible matchup for the Philadelphia Sixers. And they need to figure out what they're going to do because they need to try to probably get a top 3 seed to try to avoid the Miami Heat because right now it's at the 4 or 5 matchup. And if I just had to put my money on a team right now, if this was the playoffs started today, I probably would pick the Miami Heat to beat the Philadelphia Sixers.
Yeah, they're definitely a team I'm looking out for. If you right before the All-Star break, we noticed 2 teams that basically look like the best version of themselves against the Clippers, and that was Philadelphia and the Celtics. And
exactly,
you saw Jason Tatum play outstanding, and you saw Ben Simmons be the best version of himself. And I like what Brett Brown did with the lineup change. He put Tobias at the 4, moved Al Horford to the bench, and kind of ran a lot of high-low actual of Embiid and Simmons, and also staggered their minutes to where I thought this is probably the team that we're going to see from going on forward with that lineup. And it's something that I'm going to take notice of, but one thing they're going to have to definitely improve is on the road because they're a juggernaut at home. So it shows you that the pairing between Simmons and Embiid can work, but just on the road, they're a pedestrian team.
Yeah.
The pedestrian is probably just too high of a statement right now because they've struggled on the road. And
very
and with Miami, they were able to add 2 veteran pieces, Jay Crowder and Andre Iguodala, who are going to be immediate contributors. So I think the Miami Heat definitely have the lineup to make it to the conference finals, but it all depends on the seed of the Eastern Conference, which was the most important thing to me of the second half of the season because you have Toronto slotted in the 2nd seed, you have Boston at the 3rd, Miami at the 4th, Philadelphia at the 5th, and then Indiana at the 6th. So whoever's in that 4-5 matchup is going to have to play Milwaukee after that first round. So I think teams are going to look to get in that 7, the 2nd seed or 7th matchup or the 6th seed because
60. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, definitely.
yeah, because you don't want to face Milwaukee in the first two rounds at least. I would if you're gonna face Milwaukee, it has to be in the conference finals, especially for a team like Philadelphia where your Brett Brown's job is basically on the line right now. If you're gonna go out, it at least has to be in the conference finals compared to losing in the first or second round.
I don't.
Teams
Yeah,
like Miami, Indiana, or the Celtics, they're playing with house money in a sense because they have expectations, but we don't necessarily view them as teams that are gonna make it to the finals. So
I don't.
Philadelphia has the most to lose.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But I don't know. Boston is looking real good, man. Jason Turner has emerged as a star player. He's the best player in the Boston Celtics. You know, I've been on this train for a while now. He's finally shown his potential. So I think the Boston Celtics are good. I really don't. To be honest, I really don't know. Like, I feel like the media and everybody gets caught up in like, what the Bucks are doing and how they're playing, and they may go out and win 65 to 70 games this year. But I cannot really say that the Milwaukee Bucks are a guaranteed lock to come out of the Eastern Conference. Yes, they are a title contender, but if you just stack up some of their rosters compared to the Milwaukee Bucks, the Boston Celtics starting five, kind of like top six, is better than Milwaukee's. Then you look at the Philadelphia Sixers, their starting five is better than Milwaukee's. But it's just like, of course, Giannis and his team is, he has a team built around him, so it makes things more easier for him. But I can't really sit up and say, even the Miami Heat to a certain degree, would you take the Milwaukee Bucks top five? Or would you take the Miami Heat top five? You probably would lean towards Miami. So it's just like, I can't really, even the Toronto Raptors, who I originally changed to, I would say the Philadelphia Sixers are going to the finals, and I changed to the Toronto Raptors. I'm all on board with them returning to the finals.
Yeah, you've been consistent on that. You've been consistent on that. That's true.
I'm definitely rolling with the Raptors to return to the finals, but they have a squad as well, and Pascal Siakam is taking the leap and taking the next step, and they've been there before. So it's just kind of like, I don't really know who's coming out of the Eastern Conference right now, and it's very exciting, and I can't wait to see how things unfold this second half of the season. But I can't really just sit up and say that the Milwaukee Bucks, like everybody in the media and everybody that's talking about the Bucks because they're winning all these regular season games, when 60% of the games have been won in the Eastern Conference, and it's just kind of like some of the teams that they've played haven't been really that great as well. So it's just kind of like, I'm very eager to see what happens in the East.
Yeah, most definitely. I think with Milwaukee is just because of the continuity factor, and they just have a lot of depth overall. So to your point, where they might not have the most talented starting lineup, but it's clear they have a system, and the main guy that they run the system through is probably the most dominant player in the league as of right now. So the only guy that stopped them last year, as I stated earlier, was Kawhi Leonard, and the system they had to funneling him into the paint. With Philadelphia, we didn't have the chance to see that matchup last year because of the Kawhi buzzer beater, but that's probably the most intriguing matchup because when Embiid is motivated, what we saw I believe at Christmas, when he's motivated, in shape, and he wants to take the challenge on both ends of the floor, he can be someone that can guard Giannis for stretches of a game along with Ben Simmons. So we never got to see that matchup just because of how great that ending was last year with Toronto and Philly, but they overall provide the best matchup in Miami as well because we all know how, whether or not we agree on what Jimmy Butler is as in terms of his ranking as a player, we all know this guy is a dog and he can close games for whatever team he's on. As long as you put a decent roster on his team, he can bring you to the playoffs and can win you games within a series. And he showed you that last year. Like I said, if it wasn't for a Kawhi buzzer beater.
I definitely agree with what you're saying, and I really just feel like I really don't know what's going to happen in Eastern Conference. I love that about the East right now. And as great as the Milwaukee Bucks are, and you're talking about like their team structure, and we know that their coach, put it like this, their coach has always been known for regular season success. But when it comes to the playoffs, it just seems like he doesn't make the necessary adjustments to really help his team wins. Like the Milwaukee Bucks.
I can see that, but at the same time, it's like the same thing with Toronto before Kawhi came. Dwayne Casey was a good coach, but he just couldn't get through the juggernaut of LeBron. Like
that's different between the player though.
But it's like when Bud was leading the Atlanta Hawks, they were a good team that overachieved. But at the same time, do we really think a roster of Jeff Teague, DeMar Carroll, Al Horford, and Paul Millsap is going to beat LeBron James in a 7-game series? We all knew it was a great story, especially when they won 60 wins, when they won 60 games that year. But we all knew at the end of the day it wasn't enough talent to beat LeBron James and Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love in a 7-game series.
Okay, that's what I'm kind of saying about the Milwaukee Bucks. As great as they are, I don't think they have enough talent to beat some of these teams in the Eastern Conference. I really don't, because I look at as great as Chris Middleton is. Chris Middleton was an All-Star this year. Eric Bledsoe, and you talk about like their team structure, their team offense is centered around Giannis Antetokounmpo, him slashing, getting to the rim, driving from doing fast break transition, driving from the 3-point line until he gets to the rim or until he gets fouled or kicking it out once they stop him. You cannot, I say this all the time, as great as he is, you cannot rely on role players or borderline all-star players for you to get it done in the playoffs. You got to go out and be the man. You got to go out and be the go-to guy. You got to go out and be the finisher, the closer. It's going to all these teams have to do with the Milwaukee Bucks is I would say just keep the game close. Because if you keep the game close, you know the last 2 to 5 minutes of the game, Giannis may not be a factor compared to how he was in the 30 minutes before those closing moments came. Like the last 2 to 5 minutes on the court where when they're playing tight defense in a half court situation and Giannis is relying on Chris Middleton to be the closer, even though Chris Middleton is going to be their closer. But when you got to really rely on Chris Middleton to be your closer, I think that's going to hurt them, especially when they play teams. Because in the playoffs, everybody plays defense, and it's in the fast break transition points that Giannis gets. He gets about anywhere between 10 to 15 points easily on fast break transitions a game. In that playoffs, you know what's going to happen. You know the game slows down completely, and teams actually play defense, and also they're allowed to scheme because it's a 7-game series. It's not just a 1-game do or die type of situation. It's not March Madness. So
yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. However, I just want to make this point, and it all goes based on seedings. But
that's definitely true.
It all goes based on seedings. But the two teams that stick out to me are the ones that could challenge Milwaukee in the conference finals or second round, depending on what the matchup is Miami and Philadelphia. Yeah. I don't see the Celtics as that matchup. I know they have a plethora of wing players you could throw at in terms of Jason Tatum emerging into the best player of the team, Jaylen Brown, who's also proving to be worth his extension, and Gordon Hayward, who's looking to be back to his full self after the gruesome ankle injury two seasons ago. But
their team they got Kemba Walker too.
Marcus
Smart's a dog.
I'm sorry. You could keep on going.
No, they got Kemba Walker too. They got Marcus Smart's a dog. Don't sleep on Boston. Boston's team, they got Enes Kanter. Their post players aren't as great as some of these other teams, but they're 4 guys: Kemba Walker, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward. I mean, my gosh, it's just like
I just look at the matchup last season. Obviously, the terms were different because of the Kyrie Irving factor, but we also have to look at it from this perspective. They lost Al Horford and Aaron Baines, two key great protectors for that team, who are also the 2 biggest Giannis guarders in that series as well. That they won the first game of that series, and that remember the whole Paul Pierce, the Celtics are going to win the series because they have the matchup. Well, that was the closest thing they had to stopping that system, and now you don't have any rim protection. You're going to rely on Daniel Tice and Enes Kanter for stretches to guard the rim, where we saw where the best way to nullify Giannis is to have a strong wing player as the start point, and then to follow him against a strong big, whether it's a Marc Gasol, a Joel Embiid, or even Al Horford from last season, but they don't have that anymore. So the paint is just going to be open for Giannis to do what he does best because they don't have anyone to stop it. Jason Tatum has definitely emerged into a much better defender this season. Jaylen Brown's a great defender. Marcus Smart is a good defender, but let's be real. When it comes down to that matchup, none of them can't stop Giannis one-on-one. But I think Miami has the wing defenders from a Jimmy Butler, Andre Iguodala, Jay Crowder. You could throw at stretches. Toronto even has that from the system they had last season. They're just missing Kawhi, which obviously is a big factor. And also Philadelphia, they have Ben Simmons, as you said, the best defensive player of the year if we were to end the season right now, and then Joel Embiid. So those are the two or three teams that can do it. But I don't think the Celtics are, unless the seeding falls in their matchup where they could face maybe a Milwaukee in the conference final, they don't have the necessary tools to win that series.
I mean, I don't know, because we know kind of like the scheme to be Giannis Antetokounmpo, which you talked about, but maybe the Boston Celtics don't even try to go with that format. Maybe they just try to outscore him, out-hoop him. Because if you really think about it, like you just maybe the formula is to let Giannis get his and stop everybody else. Because you really, if you look, like I said, you let Giannis get 30, you let Giannis get 40 points per game, and you key on, the shooters, and you key on guys like Chris Middleton, Eric Bledsoe. I'll take my chances if I'm the Boston Celtics doing that type of strategy because I know Kemba Walker, I know Jason Tatum, I know Jaylen Brown, I know Gordon Hayward can all get you buckets and all get you points. Even Marcus Smart, who is really improved to this souped up 3-and-D guy. He's hitting threes at a high clip now that he wasn't in the past. So maybe the formula right now, if they have to face the Milwaukee Bucks, is not to try to potentially stop Giannis in the paint. Maybe you let Giannis go out and you let Giannis dominate and you stop everybody else. We've seen teams do that as well. It's called basically the LeBron James strategy. LeBron James, where you let LeBron James go out and cook and get 30 and 40, but you just stop everybody else. Maybe that's what the Boston Celtics would do if they face the Milwaukee Bucks.
I don't see it, man. I'm sorry, I just don't see it, man. They like outside from the Celtics, they definitely have their starting lineup is up there in terms of talent, but in terms of we have to think about this as well. Like obviously the playoffs it's gonna be a shorter rotation, but after their starting lineup, it's like they're also with Philadelphia, they don't have a strong bench as well either. So you're gonna be riding on that. You're gonna ride on that lineup for so long, and
you ride it out.
Hey, I don't see it. I just don't see it, man. They're not a good matchup. They're not a good matchup.
I think you just ride it out because everybody talks about like the playoffs. Think everybody is going 9 to 10 deep. We know it's 6 to 8 players that's going to play. So you just find your top 8 players and you just ride it out. I think all teams do that. Now, of course, it's okay to have options like everybody's talking about Marcus Morris and Reggie Jackson. They just signed with the Clippers. I guess we can talk a little bit about this and how they have people talking about they got 10 starters on the team. I'm like, do they really? Like, Don't confuse these guys that are leaving these teams like the Detroit Pistons and the New York Knicks as real starters. They're starters on terrible teams. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think like the Clippers have 10 starters. And I feel that, even the Clippers, like Reggie Jackson, he signed with the Clippers because his relationship, according to ESPN, with Paul George. So that was the reason why he signed with the Los Angeles Clippers. But he's not going to play. He's not playing over Larry Shaman. He's not playing over Lou Williams. Trez. He's not playing over Marcus. He's not. Where's his minutes going to come from? Pat Beverly. He's not really going to play over it. Maybe he'll get you. Maybe he'll win you a game in the first round or something when they're going like 9 to 10 deep because he knows it's a first round matchup and they want to preserve some of their top guys' energy. So maybe that's when he's going to come in. But I don't like some of these guys that just signed into these teams. And I will say about the Clippers, it's no excuses. They have a stacked team. They're stacking the deck for Kawhi Leonard. It's no excuses for the Clippers not to win a championship with the roster that they have. And all these players are going, they're signing everybody, they're doing all these things and stuff. I don't want to hear any excuses. And I will say this, the Los Angeles Clippers, and we talked about seeding on the Eastern Conference. I pray that the seeding is where the Houston Rockets face the Los Angeles Clippers because I'm telling you, the Clippers do not want that problem when it comes to Houston. And I'm sticking on that.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I see that matchup as well, just based on the one national TV game they had on TNT where I think PJ Tucker just put the clamps on Kawhi, and it was a great matchup. And Russ came to play that day. Harden showed up in the second half and it was the equalizer in that game as well. So they're definitely a great matchup. I think Houston was overall the best team that benefited from the buyout market just from. They added another 3-and-D player with DeMarre Carroll, and then Jeff Green, who could also slide into that 4.
They got wings, and they're getting a lot of wings to throw at Kawhi. That's what I'm saying. They're getting a lot of wings to also have if they potentially go to the finals. I've said this in the beginning of the season. The Clippers are the best team in the league, hands down. The best roster, the best team in the league. But I really feel that if the matchups are when they have to face the Houston Rockets in the second, I really feel like we're heading to a Los Angeles Lakers and Houston Rockets Western Conference Finals. I really feel
agree with that as well because I know a lot of people were disappointed and shocked about the Clint Capella trade, but we have to face reality for a guy that you're paying 19 to 20 million. He was going to get benched in crucial series because teams are going to go small. And we saw it against Golden State last year where although Clint Capella could be a good matchup for bigs like a Joker or a Rudy Gobert type of player, but against the big teams like I guess for the Lakers or even Golden State last year, Kevon Looney ran Clint Capella out of that series. When you're having a player like that, a Kevon Looney status, take you out of a series, you have to evaluate yourself and think, why are we going to pay this guy $19 million when we could just go smaller and play a cheaper player for that same type of job in a sense and go all out with our system? And I think their matchup that they provide just with the overall small ball is just so much to where it just frees up the paint for Russell Westbrook to be the best version of himself as well. And it gets hard in the necessary rest as well, because we talked about this before in a previous podcast, that sometimes that style of play, what Harden does, can tire himself out, where he might not be the best version of himself come postseason time in the later rounds. But now that we've seen Russell Westbrook be the best player of the Rockets for the past 20 games before this All-Star weekend. So Harden, I think, has the legs to be what we finally expect him to be in the playoffs. Obviously, the style of play is not what we want it to be fully, but since they're going all out with this Morey ball system, I think it's enough talent to make it to the conference finals. And I do believe they're going to challenge the Clippers as well, just because they're the best matchup for them, because the Clippers like to go small too, because at the end of the day, Montrezl Harrell is going to be the closing five for them as well. Zubac is going to only play 20 minutes or so in a game, so it fits perfectly.
I agree, and basically what we're seeing is, like, people love to talk about, like, small ball lineup with the Houston Rockets. People hate the Houston Rockets offense, but basically what they're kind of doing is, not only are they have a small ball lineup, they kind of have the same offense similar to the Milwaukee Bucks, with Russell Westbrook being their Giannis Antetokounmpo, especially when James Harden's off the floor, when James Harden is just really catching and shooting, when Russell Westbrook is attacking the rim and trying to find shooters. That's the same thing that the Milwaukee Bucks do with Giannis Antetokounmpo, but they just do it with Russell Westbrook. But then they also can go and switch it. People don't like to talk about they're not running any sets, but if you really look at their team offense, yeah, they may not be running any sets, but what they're doing is they run a similar offense to the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks really don't run any offense. They let Giannis attack. They're letting Russell Westbrook attack. And then when it comes to doing their small ball isolation off the dribble, James Harden going to work, playing one-on-one, then they're running that type of offense as well. So they kind of have two different types of offense, and people don't like to always just talk about, when James Harden has the ball, he's holding the ball for so long. But what we've seen, like you said, the past 20 games, we've seen Russell Westbrook be the best player of the Houston Rockets. And a lot of it has to do with them clearing out and making it, room for Russell Westbrook to go to work. And I really feel like Mike D'Antoni and Daryl Morey, they're all in on this, and they feel like we got to go all in on this, because they know if they don't reach at least the Western Conference Finals, those two may be out of there.
Oh yeah, Mike D'Antoni still has not reached an extension, and Daryl Morey, with all the controversy he caused in China from earlier in 20 and before 2020 with the China fiasco, he hasn't gone. He's gonna be fired as well if they don't reach this, because I know their owner doesn't play games.
Yeah, at least that's what I say. At least the Western Conference Finals, and it's just like, to be honest, like
that might not even be it. I think it's finals or bust for this Rockets team, honestly, because they made it to the conference finals with Chris Paul last year, and by making the Russell Westbrook trade, you're basically saying that we're going all in and we believe this team has enough to make it to a final. So this has to be the year. It has to be the year for them.
I think it's at least the Western Conference Finals, but I think it's where, I'll put it like this: it's the Western Conference. I think it's maybe the Western Conference Finals. It could be the finals, but just say they got 2 years of this, and Daryl Morey and Mike D'Antoni stay if they reach the Western Conference Finals, but they don't get it done. It's kind of like, what else do you do? Because
I'd be surprised if Mike D'Antoni is on this team next year if they don't make it to the finals. I'd be surprised if Mike D'Antoni returns as his coach next year. That's just the messages that they've been sending, because you got to think about it like this: they haven't reached an extension, nor have they allowed him to pick his assistant coaching staff as well this season as well. So it's already two conflicting reports that have been going on this season to show that he hasn't been viewed as the long-term coach of this team.
They put all the cards on the deck. James Harden, Russell Westbrook, they're both 30. They're in their 30s. It's just kind of like, it's now or never. And I feel like if it's not this year or next year, and then I'll be honest with you, I'll keep it real. If the Clippers win this title, because I always talk about, like, people want to talk about James Harden and like, James Harden choked or to a certain degree or whatever. Well, I don't necessarily agree that he choked. I just agree like certain high key pressure situations. His mentality hasn't been the same. But you can fix your mentality. You can't fix if you can't do it. I talked about it on my personal podcast where I was talking about like Giannis. He was throwing shots at James Harden. But as great as Giannis is, Giannis doesn't have the ability to do some of the same things James Harden does. And people can talk about James Harden coming up short in the fourth quarters and maybe choking to a certain degree, but it's just like it's more of a mentality more so that he can't overcome or can't do those things. But that being said, I really feel that what are you going to do if you're the Houston Rockets if this doesn't work? And also, let's say they make it to the Western Conference Finals and they lose to the Lakers or they lose to the Clippers, or let's say the Lakers are out and it's the Rockets and the Clippers, or the Rockets lose and it's the Clippers and the Lakers. I will say this: if the Clippers win the championship, it's over because it's just kind of like everybody's talking about all this balance and stuff in the NBA, but it's really like it could be over. We could be looking at another potential dynasty because everybody's talking about like the Lakers. LeBron James is only getting older each and every year. It's just kind of like I feel like the Lakers need to win it this year as well, or LeBron may never win a championship with the Lakers if they don't win this year because he's only getting older. And of course, you may get some more pieces, and then with Anthony Davis and the Lakers, of course, but you're really gambling each and every year of not winning a championship. And if the Clippers win, they win a championship, then they know they won a championship and they know how to win a championship. The same thing that's similar to the Golden State Warriors when they won that first year with the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was very important for the Cleveland Cavaliers to beat the Golden State Warriors, but they didn't, and then the Warriors ended up becoming a dynasty. The same thing can happen with the Clippers, and then what can happen with James Harden is he ran up against two dynasties. He ran up against the Warriors, and he can potentially run up against the Clippers. So I really feel like the Rockets and the Lakers have to beat the Clippers because the Clippers win this championship and win this year. I really feel like they're going to become a potential dynasty, and then LeBron James is probably not going to win a championship with the Lakers, and then Russell Westbrook and James Harden, because they're only going to get older as well, they're probably not going to win a championship together with the Houston Rockets, especially if we don't know what's going to happen if they lose early or if they fire their head coach. We don't know what type of system they're going to have. They don't have any draft picks. They really can't go out and make any moves because they put all their cards on the deck for this team. And it's just kind of like, what are they going to do? Move Russell Westbrook? And it's just kind of like we don't know what's going to happen. So I really feel that it's important, it's vital for either the Los Angeles Clippers, for the Los Angeles Lakers or the Houston Rockets to reach the finals more so than letting the Clippers reach the finals. And let's say even the Clippers reach the finals, and if they lose, okay, that's all bets are off. They're not a dynasty probably. But if the Clippers win this season, they're becoming a dynasty. It's going to be the Golden State Warriors situation all over again.
Yeah, I don't see them becoming a dynasty. I'm gonna be honest with you with that, just mainly because there's so much that can happen this season alone, and I've been I like what they've been doing in terms of they're basically playing keep away in the buyout market. They've taken away Marcus Morris from the Lakers, even though he does fit into that system that they have, and Reggie Jackson as well. So they're playing keep away with the Lakers this buyout market, but I just think an injury can change so much in this season. Like we've seen Paul George, we've seen Paul George be injury prone this season, and after the leg injury, he's been mostly consistent in terms of playing mostly 70 to 80 games in a season, but he's also had nagging injuries here and there. And Kawhi, with his load management, you just don't know how that's going to play. So even the Clippers, teams are being desperate right now because they see how wide open the league is. Like the trade that the Clippers did to even get Kawhi and Paul George, that's an act of desperation. You saw what Houston did trading for Russell Westbrook. That's an act of desperation because the clock is ticking for so much. And like you said with the Lakers, with LeBron and the lack of draft capital, there is acts of desperation to where a team has to win now in order to set themselves, because the league is also gonna change next year as well too, because the Pelicans are gonna get better. Then the Warriors are gonna be back to Stephen Curry and Clay are returning as well. So this is not how the league is gonna be from now on. So the teams are trying to see how wide open it is. So I assume that you just have to be desperate and make the necessary moves that you think in order to win that one championship, because the league is only going to change for so much next season and then the following season after that as well. So
Yeah,
I don't see the Clippers as a dynasty just because how we saw this free agency pan out last season to the league shifting from a big three to a big two. The Clippers do have a lot of necessary great pieces, but we talked about it early in the podcast. Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris are only going to be pieces that are going to play for so much because we all know the closing lineup for that team is going to be Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and Montrezl Harrell. At the end of the day, those pieces, the other pieces like a Morris, Reggie Jackson, they're only going to matter so much. And even Landry Shamet is going to fill in for that closing lineup for stretches as well. But those other pieces, they're only going to make so much of a difference. So I don't view them as this juggernaut because they're adding all these quality players from the buyout market.
Yeah, I don't view them as a juggernaut because they're adding these players in the buyout market. I'm just saying when a team wins a championship, is the reason why I picked the Toronto Raptors to go back to the finals because they've been there, they've done it before. When you win that championship, when you become like we won a championship, and you see what it takes to win a championship, you become more dangerous, regardless of if the Warriors are coming back, regardless of the situation, if the Pelicans are better or the Dallas Mavericks are better. You won that championship. You know what it takes to get to the finals, as some of these other teams don't know that feeling. Like LeBron knows that.
We also have to take into account team and chemistry as well. Like
Yeah,
there are a lot of pieces going in and out of that Clippers team as well, and we just don't know whether their locker room was already speculated to have some issues before. Montrezl Harrell has spoken now about how the team just hasn't had the chemistry that they've had last season because you're adding two superstar players in Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. So when you're also bringing in so many different faces, that changes your team identity. And I think with a team like the Lakers, they have the advantage to where they may not have the plethora of players to throw at from a wing perspective, but they have the team chemistry. They do lack one other piece, whether that's a Mo Harkless that could get bought out by the Knicks or maybe a combo guard such as a Dion Waiters type. But chemistry is a lot, and it matters going into the playoffs where you have a team identity. And I think the Clippers are going to struggle with that at some point because they have so many faces coming in. And you also have to take into account players aren't playing because of the load management or injuries with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard.
I think that's more of a case with the players aren't playing. Maybe Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, but the chemistry issues. Lou Williams, Pat Beverly, Trez, they really just dropped in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. I don't really think it's as big
That's a big dramatic change right there, though.
Yeah, dramatic change, but they improved their roster because they have two superstars. They still didn't really change like their key guys. Their key guys were all there from last year and took the Warriors to 6 games in the first round. So I don't really think it's going to be that big of an issue. But I will say, like you talked about the Los Angeles Lakers, you say they may need a piece. Everybody's so fixated on Los Angeles Lakers finding another point guard because when LeBron James gets off the floor, nobody is able to run their offense. But I don't even think they can use another point guard. That would help, of course, to run your offense like a Darren Collison. But Darren Collison says he's not coming out of retirement. But if you can't find another guy to run your offense, you go out and you sign Dion Waiters, a guy that can be a combo guard, a guy that can fill it up and get you buckets, where we know that, okay, we may not have a traditional point guard to run the offense, but we got a guy that can come in and get hot quick and put up points in a hurry, and you can run your offense through him being that combo guard, that scorer, that guy that can shoot the three, that guy can get to the rim as well. So I think it's very like urgent.
I know it's very pivotal that they do get that player.
They do get that type of player because if you don't have that type of player, then it's just kind of like you're not getting anybody. Everybody's talking about the Lakers aren't getting anybody, but they still potentially can get Dion Waiters and also can get J.R. Smith, add an additional 3-and-D guy as well. But that team is so close. You're talking about chemistry. The Lakers have awesome chemistry. That team is just so close. Who do they release? Maybe Daniels to get Dion Waiters, but they're not going to release.
You have to go based on need and just how we saw the playoffs 2 seasons ago. I know you don't think highly of him as much compared to the past, but Rajon Rondo, I think, can turn the niche just a little bit in the playoffs because we seen playoff Rondo where he has playoff series. We've seen playoff Rondo to where when he has a scouting report and can analyze a team for whatever how many games that matchup is, he can dissect the defense and turn back the clock for a certain amount of games. So I think you don't need a traditional facilitator, but Dion Waiters is one guy. As we are Miami Heat fans, we've seen a motivated, in shape Dion Waiters be able to be that combo guard that can just, whether he's starting or come off the bench, be that guy that can just rejuvenate an offense and give you crucial baskets when you need to. He may have a really high ego, but if I think LeBron James can be the guy to buy him in if he were to be given that opportunity, because I don't think JR is that guy. I don't think any other guard can be it, because you need somebody to do it off the dribble in today's league.
Exactly. I think Dion Waiters is the perfect piece for the Los Angeles Lakers. Like you said, I forgot to have Rajon Rondo. That's how bad he's been this entire season. I forgot to even have Rajon Rondo. But playoff Rondo is real, and that's what I'm saying. If Rondo, you can just let Rondo run your second unit, and then you get a guy like Dion Waiters coming off the bench with Rajon Rondo kind of setting things up. I think they were going to they'll be fine with Dion Waiters if they sign Dion Waiters. He's a combo guard. He can get hot. He's a spark plug. He's something that they need, a guy that can create off the dribble, because other than LeBron James, really, they have nobody that can really create their own shots. And that's saying something, because LeBron James, as great as he is, he's not the best at creating his own shot. So why not go out and take a risk and sign a Dion Waiters? If it doesn't work out, you can always cut him. So, but
that's the biggest thing, because we saw in that Christmas matchup where you wish that even when if you could have another guard on the floor for LeBron, the Clippers dared LeBron to be aggressive and put Patrick Beverley on him for stretches in that game. And LeBron, because he had to be the point guard, couldn't just go up into the post and take Patrick Beverley into the post and just dominate, because he had to facilitate the entire offense. So that's just something that people don't take into account, why you need another guy that can handle the ball, because if you're telling LeBron's going to be playing 35 to 40 minutes when it comes down to it in a crucial playoff series. So you don't want him to tire himself out playing point guard. You want him to be on the wing or in the post at times where he can exert his dominance and just put pressure on the defense in a sense, and have another guy worry about the ball handling duties for a certain stretch. Because we saw in Miami, he's involved his post game and to where he can be on the wings and on the post and dominate when he has a chance to, because it won't tire him out as much, because having to play point for 35 to 40 minutes, it just takes a lot out of you. Bring the ball up.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think it's important. It's very important for the Los Angeles Lakers to sign a player like Dion Waiters, a guy that can spell LeBron, 2 to 5 minutes on the court, and not necessarily spell LeBron, but just give, if LeBron goes on the bench, a guy that can, maybe create off the dribble, score at will, and let Rajon Rondo do some of the point guard duties when he's off the bench and he's getting his rest in the playoffs. But I'm really not worried about LeBron James being, having the ball in his hands and being the lead point guard. He's always kind of been a point guard to a certain degree, even though I don't consider him a true point guard. But he's always been a high usage player. And I think what's going to happen in the playoffs, and we're going over time, we have to really wrap this up. But I think what's going to happen in the playoffs is going to be similar to that 2015 Cleveland Cavaliers team when they lost Kyrie Irving, they lost Kevin Love, but LeBron James was really dictating the pace and really controlling the possession of the game. I think that's going to be the formula the Los Angeles Lakers are going to use in the playoffs, because not only are they going to have to use that formula because they don't have a guy like Kyrie Irving, they're going to have to use that formula because they don't want to run up and gun with some of these teams like the Rockets or even like to the Clippers to a certain degree, because the Lakers play defense and they have bigs. And it's just like you can slow the game down. You can play a half-court game. That benefits the Los Angeles Lakers. And also benefits LeBron James because LeBron James is controlling the time of possession on the clock. And then if you're playing some of these high-power offensive teams, you're keeping the ball in your hands more than theirs. So I think that's going to be key and pivotal for the Los Angeles Lakers. I think that's the type of strategy they're going to do going forward in the playoffs.
Yeah, most definitely. But one thing we can both agree on is if they don't make a move, then I'm sorry, but we're just gonna have to give another team in the Western Conference the title, or in a matchup against Milwaukee in the NBA Finals, because this Lakers team is currently constructed, in my opinion, is not gonna get it done. They need one more piece, and whether it's Dion or someone else, they need another piece.
Okay, we'll see.